Hey everyone, it's Monica. Welcome back to Homeschool Voices. In today's video, I'm going to give you a little pep talk if you're feeling overwhelmed and like you're failing your kids and you're seriously thinking about putting them into public schools. And as a bonus, I'm going to give you a really good resource for reading and spelling. This book right here, Uncovering the Logic of English. If you don't have it, go to Amazon and get it. No, I'm not smart enough to get any money from recommending that. But that book has literally changed my life. You ever hear about you don't know what you don't know? Well, that's kind of something that was really made very plain to me when I read this book, because I always knew that I was a bad speller. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I learned a lot of that when I read this book. And what I really learned was that I really was not taught how to read or spell in any kind of coherent way. It must have been very haphazard. I think I just learned the basic sounds of the letters, a couple of rules. I think there's over 30 rules. There's not 3 or 4, which is about all I learned. And when I read this book, and it's meant for adults, not for kids, I was helped a lot. My spelling improved. My ability to decode words that were unfamiliar, unusual words improved dramatically. And not only that, I was able to teach my kids a lot more effectively. There's two kind of kids, I say. There's some kids that really need really explicit sequential instruction from the very beginning. And there's kids like mine, and a lot of kids actually, who you start with phonics. I was using the Ordinary Parent's Guide to Teaching Reading, I believe is what it's called. Long name. But it is a phonics approach. But about halfway through, my kids just started memorizing words left and right, and they had no patience for the phonics, and I was too tired to push them, so we kind of just dropped it, and now we're going back and just making sure that we have all of this because it's important. Now, I know this all seems kind of roundabout to giving you a pep talk for putting your kids into public school, but I wanted to give you kind of a crazy example of what they're not teaching in public schools, because it's kind of a big deal. Okay, so I was going through this book with my 12-year-old daughter, Uncovering the Logic of English, because I just want to make sure that both of my kids know all of the rules. I think they know a lot of them. I think they've sort of naturally figured out several of them, but I want to make sure. So we were reading it, and I was reading Rule 1 right there, and it's just shocking to me. So let me just read this to you, okay, really quick. Do you know why picnic is spelled with a C at the end, but a K is added to picnicking? Or how about mimic and mimicking? I've asked the same question to hundreds of teachers in the past few years. In my experience, less than 1% have answered it correctly. Let me just give you a little bit of info. This is the first rule I mentioned. It's the first rule for a reason, because it's really important, and it will help you to read and to spell thousands of words. Less than 1% have answered it correctly, and fewer than 5% even knew we needed to add a K. Okay, so they're not teaching phonics in any meaningful sense in public schools. Just teaching the basic letter sounds and 3 or 4 rules is not enough, okay? They're not teaching it because they don't know it. So I'm just gonna finish this rule because you probably don't know it either. Doesn't make you dumb. I didn't know it. I like to think I'm fairly smart. Your teachers don't know it. I'm not calling them dumb. They weren't taught either. But if you're tempted to say, I might fail my kids, and your solution is to put them in a public school system that is failing kids, it's not a good solution. I mean, I wish there was an easy solution when we're so stressed out and overwhelmed and life is getting the better of us, but that's not the easiest solution. Putting them in public school is not that easy solution. Let me just finish here. We can clearly see how deeply broken our education system has become when the answer to this question is a rule which explains more than 9,000 words. Strong spellers typically rely on a word looking right to know if it's spelled correctly. So typically, when people are strong spellers, it's not because they learned all the phonics rules. It's because they just remember things really well, and they look at it and it looks right. These people are visual learners and frequently need to write down the word so they can see it. picnicking and mimicking, spelled with a K, are examples where even strong visual learners struggle when they do not understand the rules of English. Okay, let me just briefly explain this rule. So C makes a K sound normally, like cat, cat, right? But if there is an I, an E, or a Y after the C, it softens to an S sound. So a word like center has an E after the C, so it makes an S sound, center. Or circus, you have C-I-R, and that softens to an S sound. Even the word icy, I-C-Y, that C makes an S sound, C, I-C, right? So when you have a word, for example, like picnicking, you don't often use that word, picnicking. So picnic, P-I-C-N-I-C, right? But if we just add ing, P-I-C-N-I-C, ing, it's going to say picnicing, which is not what we want to say. To preserve the K sound, we must add a K. That is why you add in K. Now, the point of this is not really to give you a phonics lesson, but to point out that one of the most fundamental rules in the English language is not being taught by teachers because they weren't taught. And if you think that you're messing your kids up and the solution to that is to put them in public schools, it's not the answer. You couldn't get a more fundamental thing than learning to read and spell. And then next I would say writing, and then, middle school math. These are the main things. And you may think, I never learned these things, Monica. How am I going to teach my kids? I am going to screw my kids up. Well, let me tell you something. Those teachers in the schools aren't going to just go learn these things because you mention it to them that, hey, maybe they should read this book and then they can teach your kids properly. It's not going to happen. So let me just reassure you that there's only a few things you need to do. If you're stressed out, overwhelmed, thinking you're going to screw your kids up, okay? You really need to do your best to teach them to read as well as they possibly can. Everyone's different. Not everyone's going to get to the same level, okay? But you need to do your best. And if you do it with a phonics approach, they're also going to learn how to spell. So they do need to spell. Spell check does not catch everything. You look real uneducated when it doesn't catch things. So that's not a good look, I could tell you, as a bad speller. They need to learn to write well. Again, we don't need to overcomplicate things. They need to know what a complete sentence is. They need to know how to punctuate things. They need to know when to change paragraphs. They need to know how to order their ideas correctly, how to introduce, and how to conclude their ideas well. That's writing. They don't need to be an expert in poetry, an expert in essays. They just need to know how to do those things. And then they basically can write anything that they want to write. And lastly, they need to have a solid mastery of middle school math. That might sound like underachieving to you, except for when you consider the fact that most Americans struggle with middle school math. We're talking fractions, decimals, percentages, very, very basic algebra, very basic geometry. Okay, if you can really hit these areas and do a great job in these areas and do everything you can to figure out how to do a great job, then you're probably going to do a great job and you're gonna do better than the public school system. So I think a lot of us get stressed out and overwhelmed because we feel like we have to do everything. Like our kids have to be historians, they have to be scientists, they have to know everything in the world. And you may have noticed that I didn't mention history and science, and I do believe those things are important. But I mean, the way it's taught in public schools, kids are remembering next to nothing in those subjects. So I mean, if you just go to the library every week and have them read books, and I literally mean that are history themed and science themed, even as your kids get older, there's pop science books and there's history books, your kids will know more than your average American. Absolutely, no question about it. I don't care if the kid is in honors history, honors whatever, got straight A's, and then graduated summa cum laude in college. I don't care. Your kid will be better off. Your kid will have learned more and will be better off. So, feeling frustrated, don't stress out. There's not a lot that you have to do a good job. So you have a long time to accomplish a very little amount. And then, and the only other thing I would add is when your kids aren't doing their schoolwork, if you just try to ensure that they don't spend a large percentage of their time in kind of time wasting, brain numbing activities, then that would be helpful. If you have any thoughts or opinions, please tell me in the comments below. I really want to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, I hope you liked the video. Give me a thumbs up, like this video, comment, subscribe, and in the meantime, have a great day. Happy homeschooling. Bye-bye.